find work in Boston, I returned to Montgomery to pastor a church. After I had been in Montgomery about a year.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is Become Successful with your host, Yemi Osho. I made this video in honor of America's Independence Day, and in this video, you'll be listening to top 10 success tips by an American icon in person of late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in January 15 of 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, and he died in April 4 of 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. He died at age 39. He was an American Baptist minister and an activist. Some of his numerous activism include the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955, the Albany movement in 1961, the Birmingham campaign in 1963, and the March on Washington in 1963, where he gave the iconic speech of "I Have a Dream." That 17-minute speech is regarded as one of the finest speeches in America's history. Sit back and listen to top 10 success tips by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Hey YouTube, welcome to my channel, Become Successful with Yemi Osho. On this channel, you will have the privilege of listening to top 10 success tips by renowned individuals all around the world. Every episode promises to be a great one. You don't want to miss it. So, kindly subscribe to this channel, click on the notification bell so that when the next video drops, you will be able to have it. See you on the next episode.
The idea of nonviolence. Wasn't it also the only thing you could do, the white community having the monopoly on violence, that if you had tried violence, they would have met it with violence? It was the only device open to you, wasn't it?
Well, I'll put it another way, that morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society. And it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. Now, there is no doubt about the fact that in our struggle in Montgomery and all over the United States for that matter, nonviolence is also practically sound. It would just be impractical for the Negro to turn to violence. He has neither the instruments nor the techniques of violence. We are about 10 or 11% of the total population of the nation, and I would say we're about 1/10 of the firepower. So it would just be totally impractical and unwise and unrealistic for the Negro to think of violence. Well, I saw this in the beginning in Montgomery, but this wasn't the basic reason that I turned to nonviolence and that I believed in it as a philosophy. I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of
Villains, Jim Clark, Bull Connor, cattle prods, police dogs. But in the North, you don't have those visible villains. Isn't it hard to get your people aroused and directed at something that isn't visible?
Well, that's exactly right, and this is what I was saying when I said it's harder to see a target. In the South, in the nonviolent movement, we were aided always, on the whole, by the brutality of our opponent. It isn't the same way in the North. The other thing is that you don't have legal segregation in the North as you do in the South. So it is much more difficult to get people to see exactly what you're doing, but it isn't an impossible job. It's a hard, it's a tedious job at times to get people to be aroused from their apathetic slumbers, but I still feel that Negroes in the North can be motivated just as they were motivated in the South. And I think as time goes on with the growing economic deprivation in the Negro community, it will even be easier because people will come to see that not only is something wrong in general, but something is wrong in particular in their own economic and housing situations.
Well, what
is that these young people are saying that there must be a revolution of values in our country. As Jimmy Baldwin said on one occasion, what advantage is there in being integrated into a burning house? And I feel that there is a need for a revolution of values in America, because some of the values that presently exist are certainly out of line with the values and the idealistic structure that brought our nation into being. Unfortunately, we haven't been true to these ideals, and many of the values of so-called white middle-class society are values that need to be reviewed and re-evaluated, and in a real sense, they need to be changed. So I think the young people in the Negro community who are raising these questions are raising some very profound questions about encountered great difficulties, great problems of resistance if the war had not been in existence, so that I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties.
He saw that you would be a leader, and do you think he did in fact bring you up in some special way to face these responsibilities?
Well, I think he certainly realized the need for this, and after I decided to enter the ministry, he constantly stressed the need for leadership, and I'm sure that he hoped that I would stand out in this area. Whether he realized that I would do it or not is something else, but he certainly hoped for this.
Have as a child, was it a strict home, for instance?
Well, I guess it was relatively strict coming up in a minister's home. I faced the discipline that you would face in the very fervent religious background. However, I don't think it was over strict to the point that I developed any personality conflicts as a result of my early childhood, but it was strict enough, and I think it was strict enough for me to develop certain disciplinary principles as I came up.
Conscious of color discrimination in your own life?
Yes, I became conscious of color discrimination at a relatively early age. I think the first time was when I was about 6 years old. I had some friends who lived, well, they didn't live in front of us, but their parents had a store, 2 white boys, and they were my inseparable playmates for the early years of my life. And I remember when I was about 6, something started happening. When I went over to play with them, they always made excuses. They could not play. They were busy. And finally, I went to my mother with this problem, and she tried to explain to me in the best way she could explain to a child 6 years old. And this was really the first time that I became aware of the racial differences, or really the racial problem. She made it clear to me that this system had a long history, dating back to the time of slavery. She tried to explain the meaning of the system of segregation. But the thing I would always remember is that in the midst of her explanation, she always said to me, you must never feel that you are less than anybody else. You must always feel that you are somebody, and you must feel that you are as good as anybody else. And of course, this came up with me in spite of the fact that I still confronted the system of segregation every day.
Period, which must have been one of very great strain for you. Have you felt frightened and even very lonely in your position of leadership?
Yes, at times. I think honesty impels me to admit that there have been those times that I actually confronted fear. I don't think anyone in a situation like this can go through it without confronting moments of real fear. But I have always had something that gave me an inner sense of assurance and an inner sense of security in the final analysis. Even in the moments of loneliness, something ultimately came to remind me that in this struggle, because it is basically right, because it is a thrust forward to achieve something not just for Negro people, but something that will save the whole of mankind. And when I have come to see these things, I always felt a sense of cosmic companionship, so that the loneliness and the fear have faded away because of a greater feeling of security, because of commitment to a moral ideal.
Does that carry you as far as feeling total
I must confess that there are those moments when I feel a sense of inadequacy as a symbol. It is never easy for one to accept the role of symbolism without going through constant moments of self-examination. And I must confess that there are moments when I begin to wonder whether I am adequate, or whether I'm able to face all of the challenges and even the responsibilities of this particular position.
thrust forward into this position of leadership? How exactly did it happen? Why are you at 32 virtually the leader of the Negroes in the United States?
Well, I started out as a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama, which is a state that adjoins the state of Georgia. After I finished my graduate work in Boston, I returned to Montgomery to pastor a church. After I had been in Montgomery about a year, we had the problem there of facing many indignities and injustices on the city buses. Negroes were treated in a very discourteous manner. The bus drivers usually talked to Negro passengers in a very inhuman way. Not only that, if one had visited Montgomery, Alabama prior to 1955, December of 1955, he would have seen Negro passengers actually standing over empty seats. This was because the first 10 seats were reserved for whites only. And even if Negro passengers packed the buses and the other seats and there were no more seats left other than these seats reserved for whites only. Negro passengers could not sit there. So they had to stand over these seats even if a white passenger was not on the bus. Not only that, there were times when Negro passengers got on the buses at the front and put the fare in the box, and then they had to get off the bus and board by the rear entrance. These were some of the conditions that existed. And on the 5th of December, in 1955, a Negro woman was arrested, Mrs. Rosa Parks, for refusing to give up her seat for a boarding white male passenger. Pretty soon after she was arrested, the word got around the Montgomery community, and there was a spontaneous reaction. I think I could say safely that more than 99% of the Negro people of Montgomery rose up with a bit of indignation, a righteous indignation, I would say. And this led to the bus boycott. The Negro citizens decided not to ride the buses until these conditions were changed. They asked me to serve as a spokesman and the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association, and from this time, I found myself in a leadership position.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Become Successful with Yemi Osho. If you have any recommendation, let me know in the comment section. Kindly like this video. If you have not subscribed, kindly subscribe to this channel and click on the notification bell to be notified when there's a new release. See you on the next episode.